Network Entertainment.
Welcome to another new season of Now Steaming. Stan C here, and we're gonna kick off another new season of the show, and I guess you could say Ghost Month, with a live recording of our podcast during the Lannang Symposium held last July. Thank you so much to the organizers of the Lannang Symposium, the people from the Lannang Archives, our friends Dr. Wilkinson Gonzales and Professor Meah Ang See, for making the show a part of the schedule of events. Personally, it's a dream come true for me to actually get to record a live podcast in front of an audience with a panel of people going in and out, a live Q&A as well. Sobrang saya niya to actually engage with the community, to hear from people who actually listen to the show, to get some actual feedback, which honestly, we don't really get a lot on the show. So, thank you so much to everybody who was a part of it. And we can't wait for you to get to listen to this episode. Just for context, a lot of it is a bit of the meta-narrative of the show. We basically pulled back the curtain and explained why we do what we do, what motivates us to write and produce and record episodes of Now Steaming. So here's our story behind the podcast, live on the stage of the Lannang Symposium from this past July. Welcome to Now Steaming! Diba? At least I was able to get a canned applause kahit papano.
And I've always wanted to say also that we're live in Bahay Tsinoy today.
Yes. So it's a huge milestone for the podcast that we're actually able to do this with all of you. So before we get things rolling here, we'd like to say thank you very much to Will and to Meah and all of the organizers and people behind the Lannang Symposium. It's a huge honor and privilege for us to be here. And thank you as well for sharing your time with us. I know na, it's always tough to get into this part of the city. So please give yourselves a round of applause. You deserve it, just being here tonight or this afternoon. Halatang masyado sanay sa gabi, no? Tonight. Okay. So what we're here to do is we're actually going to be telling you our story, why we decided to get together and do a podcast about being Tsinoy, about being Chinese Filipino. And to do that, the best way to go about it is really just to tell our stories. Kind of to piggyback off of what Clifford was talking about in the previous session. So I'll introduce myself first. My name is Stan. Can we show the slides, please? Thanks. So that's me. I am one half of the Tagalog commentary team for the WWE, as in the pro wrestling company. So that's my day job. I call fake fights for a real living. Yes, that's how I make my money. I'm also a voice talent and an events host and a podcaster. But my fascination with being Tsinoy and with talking about being a Chinese Filipino stems from my time in college. So I went to UP Diliman after I graduated from Xavier. Shout out to Father Ari D, who I know is here in the auditorium. So I went to Xavier and I went to UP hoping to break away from everything that was Xavier related. Just because I'm sure if you're Lannang, you're used to being very insulated from the world, diba? From the larger world around you. And about a year into my being a UP student, I became a part of an org called UPCSA, which I know is also very well represented here. While I was at UPCSA, there was somebody from the university, another undergrad, who made some very harsh comments towards the Tsinoy community. He said, and I quote, "Dapat yung mga Tsinoy, dinedeport yan. Dapat hindi yan pinapaaral sa UP. Kasi sinasayang nila yung mga buwis na ginagamit na pambayad para paaralin yung mga estudyante." And I remember that was a very important moment for me, for my identity, kasi it made me question, bakit ako tinitira nitong taong to? What does he have against the Tsinoys? And it started a very long road that I'm currently on with the help of my friends, my co-hosts. And it turned into this podcast that we're here to have with you all. And with that, I'd like to introduce one of my co-hosts, Miss Kimberly Mas.
Okay, I think I'm gonna pick up from there. For me, it's a bit different. So he went to Xavier, I went to ICA. So in my school in ICA, mostly everybody spoke in English. So all my friends, they spoke in English. And then my mom, Iya ay Anela, takmay kiao long tsong ko peng yu kong Lannang we. Even though not a lot of them can speak, some of them hiao tia bui hiao kong. So for me, for a while, I think ko paise. And I think na breakdown ko lang yan ngayon. Kaya I was really like, I don't know, for some reason ko paise de kao lang kong Lannang we. And for a long time, I just kind of brushed off my being Lannang. So I never actually talked about it. I knew I was fluent, but when I went to college, I dated someone who wasn't Chinese for a while.
Issue.
And then alam na niya yun.
Oh.
Alam na niya yun.
All is good. All is good.
I wasn't talking about him. I was talking about the Great Wall.
Oh, actually, for context, mamaya kasi everybody might ask later, we're also engaged para wala nang tanong. Ayun. So questions answered. So anyways, going back, yun. So I dated someone who wasn't Chinese, and then I think I fought with my parents for a while. They didn't like it. So parang I didn't understand. Sabi ko, bakit kailangan Lannang, blah blah blah. So that kind of piqued my interest also in speaking about parang heritage and everything. And for me, as you can see in my bio, I'm actually one of the artists, one half of Sojian Comics. So the other half is obviously Cedric. So we do the comics together. We actually poke fun about Tsinoy, anything Tsinoy. So it's in comic format. So si Ansis, it's more of like in video format. So for us, it's we draw it and we poke fun at it. The podcast was one of the ways na it was a bit more serious. So the more serious topics, yung Great Wall, yung mga other issues, we talk about it in the pod. So apart from that, I'm actually also a host and a broadcaster. That's actually where I met Stan before. He was a radio DJ. I was a trainee radio DJ back in college. So that's where we met in Mellow 94.7. I also do like content creation on the side. So I do a lot of gaming. I host a lot of gaming events. So if you guys are into mobile gaming, you guys into like PC gaming like Valorant, I'm there. So I host a lot of those events. And apart from that, I also do like artwork. So I do like murals. If you know Yifang, I made all of the some of the branches as murals. So that's what I actually do. So with that being said, I'm one half of So Asian Comics. I wanna pass on the mic to like my other half in real
Hello.
life as well, Cedric.
Hi. So I'm Cedric Cheng, and I am one half of So Asian Comics, and Tauke is actually my dad. Period. So on my end, naman, I don't know how to explain this, but growing up, I actively avoided my Chinoy culture because I grew up with a very, very traditional Binondo dad. So very strict, very, and on my end, growing up, whenever I would learn something about my culture, it would always be because, through fights, through arguments here and there. So for me, my experiences with participating in the Chinoy traditions, cultures wasn't so good. So that's why I forced myself to be, back then, as Western as possible. So the way I speak, the things that I was interested in. But to be fair, I was very interested with old Master Q comics and Tintin. So that was what started my hobbies, even back then, to illustrate comics for the school newspaper. I'm from Makati Hope, by the way. And then after that, I studied in St. Benilde for multimedia arts. What else pa ba? The only reason why, my interest with my roots peaked again was because of So Asian Comics. Like when Kim and I, when we started that, it was just a joke. And then overnight, people started sharing it because they related. And for me, that was when I felt like, oh, so there are people who share the same experiences, which became easy for me when Kim and Stan invited me to join the Now Steaming podcast. So with that, on my end, other than So Asian Comics, I also deal in custom and rare vintage eyewear for my shop, Studio Rotherwood. And I am also a visual designer and an illustrator and a podcaster for Now Steaming.
So when we started the podcast, our tagline was we're now steaming, dishing out hot takes from Chinoy millennials, which when we started in 2021 still kind of sounded young because I was 31, these guys weren't 30 yet, but now that we're in our mid-30s,
Age reveal.
parang tumatanda na kami lalo, and we realized na the millennials aren't as young as we used to be. See, we're the generation, affected kayo, no? We're the generation
Yeah,
that's
actually.
chronically online. Diba? We were the first generation that really grew up around memes, around internet culture, around I can't use the actual words. I'll say crap posting.
Yes.
Right? All of those things that we see online, making jokes about current events. That's our generation eh. And we also came up during the time na Tsinoy culture started to take center stage in local media. Diba? My Binondo Girl was a thing back in the early 2010s. I actually wrote my undergrad thesis about it. Mano Po was a thing diba? For what, over 20 years and
I think
7,
they still
8
have
films?
until today.
I have no idea. I stopped keeping track.
Yeah, I know because
There was a recent one.
A recent one.
It's still around.
So yun, it's still around, diba? Can't Buy Me Love, sino yung mga nanood nun? It's on Netflix. I know si Aya Ivan Mandy is a huge fan of Can't Buy Me Love, diba? It features Tsinoy culture front and center, diba? Even though you have a non-Tsinoy actor in Bel Mariano as the lead, but that's neither here nor there. We came up during this time na nakikita na natin Chinoys are in the spotlight. You have Chinoy actors like Kim Chiu, like Richard Yap, Dennis Trillo, taking up lead roles. Some Chinoy roles, some not Chinoy roles. And parang yung pagiging Chinoy nila started to matter less and less. And I won't speak for you guys, but for me, it was very important kasi when I was younger, it was hard finding someone who looked like me, someone who sounded like us. To aspire to.
Yeah, there was nothing on media at all. So that's why I was also ashamed. I was like, ma, bolang de kong lola. Di na yan uso, ma. Can we not speak in Hokkien? And I didn't understand that like growing up, that there were also people who spoke the language. And I think, going back to like Mano Po and My Binondo Girl, singit ko lang dito. Because I was actually casted in a minor role lang naman, mga extra.
Which film?
Hindi ko na sasabihin, hahanapin nyo mamaya.
Hahanapin nyo mamaya. Binanggit mo na eh.
Hindi ka na sa ABS-CBN with Coco Martin. Hindi ko na sasabihin.
Dalawa lang yan. Probinsyano o Batang Quiapo?
Hanapin nyo na lang. Anyways, there was a role there. I think we talked about this in the podcast briefly, na they were looking for Chinoy. So, napunta ako doon that time kasi they were looking for Chinoy talents. And then me kasi I was in Miss Chinatown back then. I won't say the year anymore. They brought us there to the set. And pagdating namin doon, they were telling us, wala pa kayong Chinoy outfit? And I'm like...
So what's a Chinoy outfit, Kim?
Cheongsam daw, cheongsam. Dapat may ready. Pagbukas daw namin ng wardrobe, may mga cheongsam. Yun daw
show
yung
of hands,
everyday
show of hands
outfit.
muna. Everyone in the crowd, show of hands. Sino rito ang may cheongsam sa wardrobe nila?
Like, see, 1, 2, 3.
It's like 4 people!
5!
4 people!
That's like less
diba?
than 10! And I'm like, yan pala yung... And I was like, oh wow, the staff and the production actually thought I had this full rack of cheongsam in my wardrobe, which was not true. Akala yata nila, nagsusot ako ng cheongsam sa bahay. Paglabas ko, nagcho-cheongsam ako. It's very stereotypical.
Magsa-supermarket ka, naka-cheongsam ka.
Naka-cheongsam din ako. Wala. Actually, wala. Isa lang cheongsam ko.
You guys are laughing because it sounds so ridiculous. Diba? When we go out of the house, we're wearing stuff na sinusot ng kahit sino, diba? Like every other Filipino. So dun pa lang, the basic concept of attire, parang na-stereotype ka na, na-typecast ka na. And those were one of the things that I also experienced. So parang, there's something wrong here, there's something amiss. And why do I feel like a stranger in my own homeland? But that was one of the questions that we set out to answer when we started the podcast. Now, when we got together as a team, sina Kim and said, they mentioned this earlier, they were already doing So Asian comics. And this is where they, would make fun of things like Chinese New Year. Kasi diba pag Chinese New Year, nilalapitan tayo ng mga hindi natin Chinoy na friends. Uy, pahingi naman ng tikoy. Right? And I don't know about you, may tikoy factory ba kayo sa bahay?
Actually, ilang beses na namin drinowing yung tikoy na yan, and it's still relevant every year. I mean, you guys can see it on the screen. So this was actually a meme format. So on the top it says, what my friends do on Chinese New Year, which is like, pahingi ng tikoy, the usual. And then what people actually, or what society thinks we do, is we give out tikoy. Oh. And then the fourth panel is what my friends think I do in Chinese New Year is to have like a tikoy factory. So yun yung dinowing namin sa baba. And the last is, what we actually do in Chinese New Year is to eat in Gloria Maris or eat in some Chinese restaurant.
This is life experience. This is lived experience.
Lived experience. And it's true. And we were actually surprised that usually kasi we would ask each other if it was relevant or parang nakaka-relate ka ba. So that's why we drew that.
Yeah, it's paano ba, narin din ako hearing that question. Uy, pahingin naman ng tikoy. Kasi wala naman tayong tikoy factory, di ba? Unless your name is Jeric Chu of Engbitin.
Parang nung high school pa yata ako High school pa yata ako. Hanggang ngayon, nagtatrabaho na ako.
Right.
Ganun pa rin. It's still the same question.
And we had all of these rants within us. But we realized na we needed someone to talk to about it. And so we found each other and decided na, you know what, let's start a podcast. Let's talk about it. Kasi it was 2021, COVID was all the rage. We were all stuck at home.
Yeah, well, everyone was making dalgona and other things. You're like, yeah, let's do a podcast.
Oh,
Going in a
Let's do a
long
podcast.
time.
Right. So we started a podcast. I'd already been doing it for 7 years independently of now steaming. And then si Kim was dabbling in esports. And as he said, relatively new to the art of podcasting.
Yep.
So it was really a learning process for all of us because for me, I had to learn how to deal with 2 new co-hosts. For Sed, he had to learn talaga how to be a podcaster, diba? That was something that
I have zero experience in broadcasting, but voice acting before, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. And I think for me, it was more of putting the Hokkien language in the podcast. I think for me, I think everybody gets this. So maybe when you get to college, when you're working, nakukuha nyo to yung, can you speak in Chinese? Kung may Chinese na classmate or Chinese na co-worker.
Like
can you
Tae Diok Lai.
yeah. Parang, can you both speak in Chinese? Sige nga sample. Parang ganun. And I'm like, my brain is like, there's an on and off switch and my brain is like off. When I'm not at home, I don't speak in Hokkien, not unless like you start the convo with me in Hokkien. So
And the countless remarks of, so kilala mo ba si Big Boy Cheng? I'm like, no, we're not related, okay?
Actually, yeah, diba? Now that you think about it, we ask all of these things, yung mga stereotypical questions or the FAQs, frequently asked questions. It comes up, or it comes to us as silly, diba? Borderline dumb. And we decided that we wanted to use the podcast to poke fun at it, maybe to even dunk on it, and to also try to ask ourselves, bakit ba ganito? Why are we looked at a certain way? Why do we believe certain things a certain way? Why did our parents raise us a certain way, diba? Even things like, bakit may Great Wall, diba? And if you don't know what the Great Wall is, it's that invisible wall that prevents you from dating someone who's not Lannang or not Tsinoy, right? Show of hands, sino dito may Great Wall? Uy, umamin.
Wow.
Really?
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Really?
Wow.
So, I didn't know that I had a Great Wall. I also dated someone who was not Lannang.
High five.
Yes.
High five.
First
High
of all,
five.
you may not know it now, but when the time comes, that's when you'll find out, oh, I have the Great Wall.
Yeah. Cedric's right. Cedric's right.
Totoo.
You'll only know once you're actually there. Kasi when you ask your parents, at least in my case,
No,
I asked
we're
my
modern.
mom. My mom kasi is Chusia. Yung guama ko was Bisaya. And then my guakong was fresh off the boat. Or whatever he stowed away in. I would have assumed na wala kaming Great Wall sa family because of that, right? And they were like, oh, you date whoever you want to date. But then, one time, I was with my ex. And then, yung dad ko nakisabay sa kotse. I didn't tell him that I was with my ex. He just got on. And then, nailang na ako eh. Sabi ko, pa, si ganyan. My dad's reaction was, nary a word, just, That's when I knew. Kasi when I brought my now wife to meet my parents, they were like, oh, wow, how are you? Ganyan, oh, saan ka galing? So many questions. Because she was clearly Lannang also, clearly Chinese, right? So, things like that, yung mga hindi natin napapag-usapan or ayaw natin pag-usapan because sinabi sa atin ng parents na let's not talk about it because it's taboo. Those are the things we wanted to talk about. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, I get a thrill out of seeing people's reactions when we start talking about those things.
Yeah, actually, I think Sed wants to
No, 'cause
interject here.
like shared experience, because that's exactly my dad. Because, not me, but a sibling of mine dated. Because my parents would say things like, "Oh no, we're modern. We don't have that." Right? Sure. And then a sibling of mine started dating someone who's not Lannang, and then that was when all hell broke loose. But compared to when I first brought Kim to the house, we were just friends. We weren't dating even. We just happened to like the same hobbies with film photography.
Ba't mo dinala sa bahay?
Oo nga eh.
What was the context again? I can't what was the context? Oh no, we stopped by to get something quickly and then bring Kim home. And then I remember vividly when I brought Kim through the kitchen door. Then my dad was like watching his CCTV telenovela, right? He suddenly stood up. And I was like, oh.
No. I remember this. We went to get something in your house.
Yes.
And
You greeted my dad.
I greeted my dad. Well, technically my dad. I greeted his dad and I said, Ho'ami, uncle, that time. And then his dad was like, whoa. And for and then he said that you never bring Chinese friends home.
Because in context, as someone who studied in St. Benil Multimedia Arts, there's rarely any Lannang in there. So I stood out. So the friends that I would bring in throughout the years were, not Tsinoys, right? So when I brought Kim, and Kim spoke with that accent, na Ho'ami uncle, well, that was when my dad's like. And then after that night, after I brought Kim home, it was around 11, 12, my dad's usually in bed. When I came to the kitchen door, my dad's awake. I was like, why are you awake? And he's like, are you dating her? I'm like, no, we're just friends. You're stupid and blind. So
and with that, we're gonna clip that out for the wedding. We're gonna clip that out for the wedding.
Edit that out.
Edit that out.
Pang SDE na yan.
Pang SDE.
So, all of these things na dala-dala namin, we wanted to bring it to the podcast. And when we started, that's basically how we looked. The next slide, where that's us in 2021, just recording
Sorry,
from
I got
home.
a really bad screen cap. We're all really derpy.
No,
there,
it's
but
okay, it's
whatever.
okay. It was really just us ranting. Ranting about the environment we grew up in, ranting about what it was like to grow up in an exclusive school, in a Chinese school, how it felt like we were in such a bubble, how we were sheltered.
Yeah, and I think this time you guys can see that we're all in different locations. This was 2021. I think it was ECQ. Wow, I haven't heard that word for so long. Extended community quarantine. So we were
let's try
all
to forget that.
recording at home. So I think this was the second episode that we had.
So we recorded basically an entire season of us ranting about being Tsinoy and about being in our 30s. And then we would also interview some people, some guests, mga friends basically who were down to talk with us. And then we realized that at a certain point, we're gonna run out of things to complain about. We're gonna run out of things to rant about. And it just so happened that about a year after we started, I got engaged. And I went through some...
remember this.
I went through some conflict then with my mom. Kasi dalawa lang kami, just me and my shobe. Ako yung una ikakasal. So syempre for my mom and my dad, it's a big deal. Parang, let's throw the big fat Tsinoy wedding. And it became this tug of war. And I didn't want to rant about it on the podcast. So I had to tell Kim and said, we have to take a break. So we took a break and we didn't come back until after the wedding na in 2024 when we joined the Pod Network.
There you go.
So that's us joining TPN. We presented a pitch idea to the Pod Network, who's here with us, by the way. They're actually helping us with the video and audio recording. So can you please show some love to the Pod Network?
Thank you so much.
So, they also were fascinated by the idea na, it's a Tsinoy podcast. These are young people who want to talk about, being Chinese Filipino. Again, mga topics na hindi naman napapag-usapan. So, we actually sat down and we got a writer on board. So his name is Ranel Cheng. I'm not sure if he's here already. But si Ranel naman was my classmate in UP. And he went to a high school in Bacolod. So iba rin yung point of view niya. And what we wanted to do for this version of the podcast, this iteration of the pod, is to make it more inclusive and to make it more about learning. Na yes, meron pa ring ranting, pagrereklamo, but it was also with the intent to ask.
Yeah, I think before it was just more of us. And who'd actually check out the podcast? It's either Aryan, wife of Stan, or other friends. So we didn't really have a flow that time. So it was just more of, whatever pops into our head.
A lot of freestyling, a lot of free complaining. And having Ranel, our writer, on board, super helpful. Kasi he's the guy who would actually give us the overall direction of the pod. He'll tell us na, okay, so this is our core message for this episode. Like today, we're gonna talk about agawan ng mana. So bakit merong agawan ng mana? Why is that a touchy subject, not just for Tsinoys, but for Pinoys in general? And then, asking the questions that sprout out from there. Or when we did a series on LGBTQ plus Tsinoys, asking those questions like, what led you to discover your identity? So very important to actually have someone who would help keep us in line, in check, para rin hindi lang puro reklamo yung podcast.
Plus, I think you have to ask the right questions. For me, there are some episodes that are a bit sensitive, so we really have to consult with the writer, and at the same time, we have to really be careful with what we say. I mean, well, our podcasts so far are all pre-recorded, so we can actually check the audio first and then cut it out if you don't like what we said or we feel like it's a bit controversial, we cut it out. So
Except for this one.
Yeah, except for
this
this one.
one's like,
Dami nyo na nasabi.
Pwede pang SDE, no?
Oh, pwede. And we've been very fortunate over the last year plus because in the current iteration of the pod, we were able to get into subjects and episodes na we didn't think we would be able to tackle. So can we please get to the next slide? So, for example, if you've checked out the pod, you would notice an episode on yun nga, Agawan ng Mana, which we were very fortunate to have Attorney Kesterson Kua of Sky Law, one of the up-and-coming firms owned by a Tsinoy lawyer. He actually talked about why Tsinoy families get into feuds over inheritances and how that can be curbed. So, very insightful din yun, especially from his perspective as a young father, na ayaw niyang magkaganon yung mga anak niya one day. On the right, you've got Atoy Ko, PBA legend, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, who actually is an alumnus of Kyaotyong. So Atoy Ko and his son, Andre Ko, who is a good friend of mine as well, they joined us naman on the podcast to talk about his career as a Tsinoy basketball player, how it was a very non-conventional career path, even back then, kasi yung heyday ni Atoy Ko was in the 70s. Yep. So you wouldn't have found any Chinoys who would invest in athletics. And they also traded stories about fatherhood kasi Andre is a father himself now in his mid-30s. So, yun, that's another one of those episodes that we really like.
Yeah, it's more of like the POV, how they were able to manage that career. But I think these two, well, especially the one with Attorney Kesterson, it was surprisingly, like, it was an episode that was well received by, let's say, my family. And I actually am surprised that they're like, oh wow, you actually got to talk about something that we don't talk about. So yeah, I think we'll keep on going. There's still a few more episodes that we have. So can we go to the next slide?
Speaking of things that we don't talk about politics. We don't talk about it a whole lot, diba, as Chinoys. We're told to just be silent about it. So when the Alice Guo issue came out last year, we felt that it was very important that we actually talked about it. Kasi Alice Guo pops up, is in the news, and suddenly lahat ng Chinoys become a target or become stereotypically associated with Alice Guo. Na parang, ano, kauri mo ba yun? Katulad mo ba yun? Right?
Parang parehas lang kayo eh, ganun.
You want to tell that story about...
Yeah, I was gonna get to it. So my cousins, they study in one of the Tsinoy schools downtown, so I'm not gonna name it anymore. They went to Lucky Chinatown Mall. So I'm pretty sure everybody here has been to Lucky Chinatown Mall. And, she wasn't even wearing anything. Like, it was just a casual day out in the mall. And somebody approached her and said, "Amin ang West Philippine Sea." To her face. And I'm like, if that were me, I'm like, oo, atin. Diba? Parang gets mo. And then I feel like it's like right to their face in a public mall where everybody has access to, like, there's a lot of like people. So nagulat lang din ako when I heard that news.
And he ran away right then and there.
Yeah. Sinabi lang yun, amin ang West Philippine Sea.
Chicken.
And then out.
Duwag.
Typical Pinoy, talking crap na, let me just try to say whatever I want and, I don't care about the consequences. When the Alice Guo issue came out, we began to feel na it was something we had to discuss kasi tayong mga Lannang, tayong mga Chinese Filipinos, we are affected whether we like it or not because we can easily be profiled, diba? Syempre, the Alice Guo issue stems from the Pogos, diba? And in line with the Pogo issue, it's also connected to the geopolitical tensions between China and the Philippines. And without getting into the weeds of that very sensitive and delicate topic, I just want to talk about the personal here. Kasi it gave me flashbacks to that experience from college nung sinabi nung taga-ibang organization na yung mga Chinoy dapat dinedeport. It gave me flashbacks at that time where I was made to feel alienated in a place which I call home. Kasi pag tinanong ka, di ba, like when the Alice Go issue was hot, they would ask Chinoys na pag nagkagera between the Philippines and China, kanino ka kakampi?
Yeah, I was gonna get to that.
That's exactly what happened
yeah,
in my workplace before.
Yeah, not workplace even. We got interviewed for So Asian Comics in
that too.
A big network. And then I was just surprised that that was the first thing the host asked us. Like, if magkagera and then magkalaban yung China and the Philippines, kanino ka sa side?
Buti na lang it wasn't live.
On air. So
I think they edited that one out.
they edited out. Like we had to talk to them afterwards and all those things.
That's a question that for me is very short-sighted. I'm really trying to find the best words aside from stupid. Kasi, di ba, when you look at your typical Chinoy, lalo na yung mga hindi naman super mayaman, wala naman tayong bahay sa China eh. Right? Baka siguro meron kang plot of land in the Chinese cemetery.
Or basically, wala naman babalikan doon.
Oh, wala naman tayong babalikan doon eh, di ba? Like there's a reason why yung mga angkong natin or yung mga taikong taima natin, they fled. They wanted to get the hell out of there and come here or elsewhere. So I just feel like it's so ridiculous to ask that of a Chinoy, especially if they're third gen, fourth gen na Chinoy here in the Philippines.
I think it's just also because some people are not that exposed to Chinoys.
Yes.
So like whenever I meet somebody who would ask me about my being Lannang or my being Chinoy, I have to explain. Parang may ano na ako eh, may deck.
May primer ka ba?
May primer na ako. So parang whenever somebody asks, ito yun. Then I have to narrate the entire thing again about being Lannang, about being Chinoy. And then I had to tell them, like, we've been here since the Spanish, my taima was here since the Spanish time. So it's just, wala lang. It's just parang foreign concept to them still that there are Lannangs or Chinoys here in the Philippines.
And I think zooming out, it's important that we talk about it because being Chinoy doesn't mean na you should just be quiet all the time, even if that's how we were raised. Our parents, our grandparents, they're from the generations that were raised with the immigrant mentality. And if sinabing immigrant mentality, it basically means wag kang gagawa ng gulo. Don't cause chaos. Stay silent so that less talk, less mistakes. Diba? You have to be the model minority. This is something that's also common even in the US, right? Clifford knows what that's all about. And it also applied to our ancestors. But we're a generation that's very much entrenched in the Philippines already. And that's why it's very important that we get to speak out. Especially since iba na yung pananaw natin. Even someone like Cedric who gets called more Western, more than he'd like to, embrace.
As lack of a better word, a self-imposed Wanagong back in the day. So I had to learn all of my Hokkien through Kim when I met her.
Yeah, it's more if you had to pick it up from there. So yeah.
Yeah, so yun nga, going back, diba? Whether you're someone like Ced or someone like Kim who she admits was raised to be a typical Chinoy housewife, we all have a stake in what's going on here in the country. Whatever laws are happening, diba? Ultimo EDSA, pag nag-rehab, lahat tayo apektado, diba? Because we're all gonna be stuck in traffic an extra hour or two. So we all have a say in whatever happens, and we feel like the least we could do is actually talk about it on the podcast.
Yeah, I think it's also foreign also to let's say my parents when they heard like I had a podcast, and I think I'm experiencing the same thing as you. They would say stuff like, "Why are you saying all of that in the podcast? Isn't it dangerous? We shouldn't open up too much. That's so much information you're putting out in the podcast." But I would tell her, "So paano ka magpa-podcast pag hindi ako magsasalita?" Diba? Like how can I actually reach the people who also don't want to speak out, right? And that's exactly why we're doing this podcast. We're opening up topics that are not usually talked about in, family gatherings or maybe even between friends or between
Straight up
Filipinos.
taboo. Yeah, straight up taboo.
On the note of taboo, the reason why we also included yung episodes with Meah Ang See and with my friend Liv Tanong is because we also want to share stories na hindi masyado napapag-usapan. For example, we had Meah on earlier this year to talk about the kidnap for ransom issues in the 90s. I know that the students here from Kiaotiong hindi nyo na naabutan, no? But like in the 90s, Chinoys were targets for kidnapping. So much so that the very first scene in the very first Mano Po movie, features Aramina's character being kidnapped. I kid you not. It was that big of a deal. And when I was growing up in Xavier, yung mga ID namin color-coded siya. Kasi kung yung ID mo red, hindi ka pwedeng lumabas na mag-isa. Kailangan susunduin ka ng yaya mo or ng fetcher mo or ng driver or whoever. So, it was that big of a deal. And sina Meah, sina Auntie Tessie, you know, their organization really did so much work all the way back then, even until now, regarding the kidnap for ransom thing. And it's so unfortunate na na-profile tayong mga Tsinoy as one of the primary targets for such a thing.
Yeah, I think even some roles are like that, kidnap victim in mainstream media, right? Not just Mano Po, even in TV series, it's like that.
Who watched Incognito here? Who watches Incognito?
Oh, okay, we have
diba?
here.
Yung character ni Bel Mariano na kinidnap, diba? Is also a stand-in for an East Asian. Ganun din.
I think also just to add about the kidnap for ransom, I think it's something that we don't talk about. It's just more of when you know, you just know. And then, you know, the generation now, I'm not sure if they've done research or they got into that, but it's sometimes we don't talk about it already now. Not unless you know something
No, you know what?
happens,
Let's
right?
ask the students right now. For our students here, nakarinig na ba kayo na meron kayong kaklase, kabatch, or kakilala who was kidnapped? It's a foreign concept,
foreign
right?
concept.
For our generation, we all knew someone. I had a classmate na yung buong pamilya niya, tinali sila. Their hands were tied behind their backs while a bunch of robbers took everything they had sa bahay.
I think for me to add also to that, I had a classmate. She was seated 3 seats in front of me, so by class number, and she was also a kidnap for ransom victim. And I think for that day, when she was kidnapped, our school, Ika, said to our class, like, maybe all of you girls can just go home, take a rest, because everybody was in shock. Like, we didn't know when she was gonna come back. Her seat was always empty. So I think for a week, we didn't have quizzes, yay. Wala kaming quizzes. But at the same
Sorry
time...
naman, nahiya naman yung mga quiz sa inyo, di ba?
Yeah, we didn't have quizzes. I guess, you know, for us, I think that was high school or late grade school. Everybody just didn't talk about it. Like, our teachers like, let's just not talk about it. When she comes back, don't ask her too much questions because she might be overwhelmed and things like that.
Makati Hope's chill.
Wala sa inyo?
Wala. We don't have anything like that.
Hindi kasi kilala yung school niyo eh.
I know.
Oh!
I know.
Kaya dito pala ako nakaupo.
I would only hear these things in the news. I'm like, we don't have the Makati Hope, don't we? No, we don't.
Yeah, I think it's also a smaller school with
It's
they
a
only have
smaller
2
school.
sections.
Yeah, we in one batch for like
School
50
pa talaga
people.
yan?
Batch namin yun eh.
Oof.
I'm kidding.
So, on a more serious note, we also wanted to share stories from LGBTQ plus Tsinoys. So, my friend Liv Tanong is a Xavier graduate. And if you know Xavier School, you know it's a school for boys. Liv came out as a trans woman a few years ago, and I wanted to share her story on the podcast. And she also opened up about things like what it was like to deal with her identity growing up in Xavier, around the boys. Now that she's an adult outside of Xavier, what was her parents' reaction, that type of stuff. So yun, that's another episode we were really proud of because we were able to tell a story na I'm sure 9 times out of 10 iiwasan in Tsinoy gatherings.
Mm-hmm. And I think to add to Liv's story, we also had, this is for Women's Month, so we had DJ Calso Santo in the pod as well. So she's a Tsinoy, part of the LGBT, so she's a lesbian, and it was the first time she actually opened up about the topic, how she navigated with her gender identity and everything else. So
yeah, kasi these are stories na sinasabi ng parents natin nakakahiya, 'di ba? Pag pinag-uusapan, you know, it's taboo, and we just want to get rid of that. And one thing we've learned doing the podcast is the more you talk about something, the less taboo it becomes. So, in the next slide, you'll see then we also wanted to feature stories of other members of the community, like si Justin Chua, who you'll hear from later, a content creator who taps into the Gen Zs naman with his humor, diba, in Hokkien. So sumikat siya sa TikTok because of his Acha character. You also have on the right Rebecca Chua Unsu, who's a veteran actor and film producer. She produced a movie called Her Locket, which is a revenge film about yung story niya and her brothers and how nagkaroon sila ng family feud over inheritance. So, ganun din, babalik tayo sa kwento ng agawan ng mana, which, a lot of, not just Chinoys, but families in general have had to deal with for one reason or another.
It's actually all of our topics intertwined together when you actually look at it in that sense. But yeah, adding to like Auntie Rebecca also, it's surprising to have someone like her in the show that has a different perspective also on the topics. Being a woman also, she dived into that in the podcast. Like she only was able to follow her dreams when she reached 60 and all of that.
We also got to talk to Valerie Tan, who's a prominent MC and host in the Tsinoy community. So it was her and Kim. They recorded an episode na one-on-one lang. And we wanted to talk about how when you're Tsinoy, chances are you either benefit from misogyny or are hindered by misogyny. So I can't speak for sina Kim, but in my case, diba, may shobe ako, I grew up benefiting from the fact na lalaki ako. I could go home much later than I wanted. I did as many activities with organizations as I wanted. I hung out with friends, stayed out late, whereas my sister bantay sarado siya in college. And she really felt shackled.
Yeah, I think it's the same for me. We dived a lot into that in that episode. I also talked to Val about pursuing a different career, because usually when you're a woman, Chinoy woman, the standards is, or the expectation rather, is to just either be a stay-at-home mom, which is actually not bad. I'm not putting that down. Some people actually prefer that, or just let your husband take the wheel. That's usually the case. And we also talked about how women can't really say what they want, or you can't really express yourself because it's not right as a woman.
Yeah. We've realized then, like I said at the start of this session, that our generation's getting older. Kami mga millennials, it sucks. Nagme-maintenance meds na kami. Sina said
Ikaw
and
lang ata.
No, I don't have any.
Wala kami.
Wala pa kami.
None of that.
Sina Sed and Kim are about to get their Senomar, their certificate of no marriage, and all of that stuff. We're already dealing with things that we used to just leave to the elders, because we're beginning to realize that our elders are also getting older or are sadly dying out. So, again, these are also topics na iniiwasan natin, right? Like, nobody asks their parents about, paano yung funeral arrangements when you pass away? Diba? Kasi pagagalitan ka sasampalin ka ng nanay mo, diba? But,
or even inheritance, right? Like, parang, Ma, when can I have my inheritance? Sasabihin sa'yo, ano ba yan, buhay pa ako? Boleso ah.
Right.
Yan. That's usually the case. That's why you just don't talk about it until when they're gone. Then that's when everything goes haywire. Like,
Yes.
you don't know what to do. And, I just wanted to add to this, since this is already like post the episodes that we posted about inheritance with Attorney Kesterson. So we had like a family dinner, and then they opened up, hey, Kim, I listened to your podcast. So I was like, oh my gosh, what did you actually hear in the podcast? But the first thing that my family actually opened up was the inheritance. And that was the time that, they started planning for their funerals and all of that, which was something that was taboo. So I was like, I like how this is making like tiny changes like in my family. So hopefully for anyone who has heard the podcast, it might have the same effect, hopefully.
Like actually talking about it is already a big step in on itself, right? So not just, let's say, the inheritance, but also when it comes to acceptance of LGBT. Because I've also personally, I have messages as well from people who would DM me about our episodes. And for me, personally, I've had a lot of comments about the Great Wall episodes and also the LGBT-related episodes. Now, I like how, our podcast is not a substitute for therapy, but it's nice for a lot of people to message that they feel the same way and that they feel less alone because of all these things that we're doing.
So yeah, I just want to acknowledge our writer Ranel Cheng. He's finally in the house. Let's show some love to Ranel, a huge part of the podcast. He's basically like our fourth co-host. So
you made it on time.
You made it.
Ish.
So yun nga, the podcast, while it is not a substitute for therapy, it hopefully also
Disclaimer.
opens doors for people to open up these conversations na kahit kami or kahit ako, hindi ko nasasama sina Kim and said, I'm irreverent. That's my nature talaga as a personality, as a host. I like to poke fun. I like to crack jokes. I'm not a comedian. That's sina Ansis. I leave that stuff to them. But my therapist told me that I handle difficult topics by deflecting with humor and sarcasm. And that's what I hope to bring sa podcast. Kaya namin to pinag-uusapan, even if it's something as taboo as when my ama died a couple of years ago. Ang dami kong emotions na kinimkim from that moment na sa podcast ko lang nalabas, and my dad actually had to sit me down and be like, why did you talk about that? And sabi ko sa kanya, because we never did. Because you never let me. You never wanted to have that conversation. Which brings me to feedback. Feedback's very important. It's super important to us. But we're not gonna lie. Nasabihan na rin kami na boleso kayo for talking about these things and for talking about these things in a certain way. I cuss a lot on the podcast.
Just you.
And that's just really how I express myself, and we get all of those feedback, positive or negative, and I think it's equally important.
Yeah, I think for me, again, as a woman, my mom would always say, "Oh, di tsai, di man kokonglo," or just don't say it. And I think for a while we had this tug of war when I was doing this podcast or whenever I'm hosting. She feels like I'm too extroverted. Like I talk too much, I say too much information that other people might not receive well, or some people might take it the wrong way. Whereas I think I understand that, like from drawing the comics, like some people are also like they take it the wrong way. But for me, I think I'm just speaking from the place that I'm coming from, right? Like, or I just speak like whatever I feel like saying. I mean, obviously I filter it out, but I still say what I want.
You speak your truth.
Yeah.
On my end, my parents are too old to understand what a podcast is, so I don't get any feedback. Yeah, but on my end, naman, to be fair, ever since starting out this podcast with Kim and Stan, on my end, naman, personally, it felt like I was rediscovering things that I missed in my childhood. So when they were talking about all of these things, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Especially when they would say things like, oh, if you're in the top 10 list, you get ang pao. I'm like, really?
So, not any top 10 list. So, alam niyo yung family associations, di ba? Yeah. So, kunwari in my case, lahat ng mga C. When I was younger, I would go to Limpoxi and Chenkwang. And pag may honor ka, bibigyan ka ng ang pao pag summer. So,
I didn't get any of that.
Baka kasi wala kang honors noon.
Wala.
Had I know that there was, I would have been motivated to get in. Yeah, there you go. But so for me, it felt like I was rediscovering things that I didn't know this was a thing in my before. So it felt like re-exploring parts of my identity that I never really got to explore. So in a way, it was a breath of fresh air to learn all of these things, but in an environment that's parang hindi siya hostile for me to learn about my culture. So, yun.
And ultimately, we really value all of the people we've met over the years that we're doing this podcast. So, si Will has actually been a guest na rin last year. We actually had him on during the first Lannang Symposium. It's a great opportunity to just meet so many different people and more importantly, tell their stories. And to talk about these things na, again, hindi siya napapag-usapan. And I think being Tsinoy, again, just a springboard of what Clifford was talking about earlier, it's a complicated identity to navigate because sometimes you don't feel Chinese enough, sometimes you don't feel Filipino enough, but we encourage everyone to take up space and to own it. Kasi that's the only way that you'll actually come to terms with your identity. And in our case, it just happens to be stirring up noise, making noise in the form of our podcast. And we want to keep the conversation going. And our goal ultimately is for you to not need our podcast to talk about these things. It's kind of like yung organization in a Meah.
Kickstarter rather.
Yeah.
The podcast is a Kickstarter for whatever you guys want to talk about. You're either shy to talk about it or you feel like it's taboo. We're going to start it off for you. And that's exactly why we did this in the first place.
Yeah, it's kind of like yung organization in a Meah related to the kidnapped for ransom victims na their goal is to not exist anymore.
Yes.
And in the same light, yung podcast namin, we want to keep it going, but if you can freely have these conversations without the need for the podcast, all the better. So there, that's our show. That's now steaming. We're going to keep the recording going though because I know we still have some time. So we're going to open the floor to anyone who wants to ask a question. And because you consented to be part of a video and audio recording, we've got an extra seat here next to you. Cedric
come
will
up
share
on
his
stage.
mic. So if you want to talk about anything, we can turn this into like a group therapy session or whatever. Pero hindi kami therapist.
Hindi therapist.
We are not mental health professionals, but
Yeah. But if you want to talk, if you want to rant about being Tsinoy, then come right up. Yes.
hello, hello. Oh, careful, careful. Yeah. How are you? How are you?
Hello, hello, hello.
All right, so let's welcome back Clifford.
Hello, Clifford. What's up?
So I just wanted to say that I really wish you were here when I was growing up in America. These are things that I wish I knew we talked about at home, but just like you said, we don't often talk about. So I guess my question is, are you looking to bring this outside of the country, or how do you have a strategy to bring it outside the country?
Are you gonna pay for our flights?
And meals? No, I'm kidding. I'm
No,
kidding.
no. We're open, but real life also takes precedence. We have jobs. These two are planning their wedding, but I would love to, take the podcast as far as it can go. Hindi lang din namin alam pa paano right now because we have jobs.
Wait, I think we actually talked about, me and Stan and Sed talked about this, taking the pod to other Chinoys who are outside. And we said that we just want to milk out all the content first locally, right? There's so much to talk about locally, and then we bring it to the next stage.
But my question would be, I don't know how these topics would, are they similar to, let's say, the diaspora? Do they
Is it the same
experience
like in
the same
America?
things?
Yeah. I didn't know there was a Great Wall until my last few girlfriends.
Oh, great.
I love how the Great Wall is real pala, di ba?
It's-
So
it's
now we're
universal.
coming
It's
to terms na bumabangga pala tayo sa Great Wall.
I think my ama has the Great Wall even more now because my mom is Pinay and I was an accident. So after that, she has to be Chinese.
So earlier I saw you had the Kaishao slide on your presentation, right? So the Kaishao topic is also something that we've talked about on the pod.
Yeah.
Na parang there's a connotation, at least from my end. I've always had a very negative connotation with Kaishao because I always felt bakit ko kailangan ng Kaishao? Diba? Ano to, my mom is so desperate to get me a Chinese girlfriend na she's gonna pimp me out for lack of a better term. Right?
Yeah, I think I wanted to add to that because I went to CSB, same as said. So it's an art school. Obviously, not a lot of Chinoys there. And second year, my mom was asking me, so do you have any Chinoy classmates there? Maybe one or two? And I said, no, not really. And then after that, she sent me to Taiwan. I don't know if you guys know. Sent me to Taiwan for the summer. Do you guys know? I think some of you guys know this, Kwan Mo Tuan or Dynamic Youth. So they sent me to that tour, hoping that I'd find someone. So when I came back, they were asking me, so anything, and I'm like, oh, I enjoyed Taiwan. That's it. I didn't find anyone.
So
there.
I know other Lannang who are around my age and they're actually asking their grandparents to arrange them.
Oh.
But that's because of what I mentioned where when you date around different races, you start feeling, especially as you get older, I need to find someone who sounds like me, who looks like me, who understands me.
Yeah.
And so the
Makes
ones
sense.
my age are all asking them to do it. Yeah.
So I can actually relate to what you said.
Same.
So my wife is from Ika. She's an old friend of mine from we met 20 years ago, and both of us dated someone who wasn't very Chinoy, especially in the Manila Nannang sense. And then while we were doing this podcast, I asked her, "Hindi ba ang hipokrito ko that I would rail against the Great Wall and I would make fun of Kaishao when I married a Chinoy?" And then she told me na, wala sometimes the convenience and the ease of it just takes precedence din. Na parang you don't have to explain yourself, you don't have to explain the culture. And I guess there's also nothing wrong with that. Ganun talaga eh. Parang it became easier to level up the relationship and to take it to the the next stage because we didn't have to navigate the trickiness of the cultures. So yeah.
I think same XP for me. Like you, I dated someone who was not Chinoy.
Ay, di ko nalata.
Yeah, I dated someone who wasn't Chinoy, but for a brief time, and then after that, it was more of my parents were already asking about it a lot, And then I said, you know what? I have to decide right now. Like I talked to my friends about it. I have to decide right now whether this will go on or I have to stop it here. So I was like thinking about it. I said, it's hard, like to explain everything, the whole situation. Like the guy was totally like, what's going on here? Like, do they like me or not?
You were
Right?
friends at the time, so he came
Yeah.
in. He knew he came in.
I came in much later.
Yeah, much
Oh.
later.
I came much later.
After he knows about this, don't worry.
Clifford, I have one last question for you, since you have a unique perspective of having been raised in the States. In the US ba, the Chinese Americans, are they also very hush-hush? Yung parang, let's not talk about XYZ.
Yeah, so this is across all Asian communities: Indian, Korean, Chinese. And so I think that you play a critical role to encourage people to talk about the issues, talk about the politics, talk about the nuance of the culture. So I actually think the Chinese in there are much worse because they're much, their immigration is more recent, as in their parents immigrated, or literally they immigrated. So to them, and you know, my grandma, my ama says this all the time, like, why do you work in politics? Why do you, even my dad, like they don't know what I do sometimes. They just think I go out and rally, which is not true. But what they say is, why work in a field where you can just be torn down so easily? And then my answer is, I work in the field because you work so hard to get me here, right? So I hope that answered the question.
No, it does, it does. Let's give it up for Clifford, please. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the different point of view, diba? Yung nga, again, that's why we want to keep doing the podcast for as long as we can. Does anyone else want to? Let's bring in Ivan.
Yeah. Oh, welcome back to the pod. Ivan was with us, by the way, in one of the episodes last year about Ghost Month. So you guys can check it out later.
You remember?
Of course.
So my question is, so you've talked about a lot of topics, sensitive topics, from sexuality to death to finance to. So do you notice a certain thread that runs through the Lannang community when you talk about these difficult topics? Is there a particular character that we have as a community that manifests itself when you talk about these different topics?
The closest thing I can come up with is how we're left to be in these positions and wala na tayong magagawa, so we just have to push through with it. Wala, no choice na, nandito na tayo eh. So for example, in the case of the grief, di ba? What do you do kapag namatay na si ama or si angkong and then hindi pa na-sort out yung inheritance? You deal with it. So there's no other choice. Wala tayong magagawa. And I know it's not an exclusively Tsinoy thing, but I think that's a byproduct of not talking about it beforehand. I think that, again, just speaking from myself, a lot of the problems that we have as a community is hindi tayo nag-uusap. We talk a lot about nothing. Sometimes we're at the family table and we only talk about the superficial things. And
Just surface level stuff.
surface level stuff, right? And maybe it's not our parents' fault. Kasi like your parents, our parents, yun yung nakasanayan nila eh. So something I learned from Andre ko, yung anak ni Atoy ko, is that it's on our generation to bridge that gap with the older generation. Kasi tayo yung mas attuned to our emotions, tayo yung mas inclined to think about, maybe I should talk to my parents and build a relationship with them, a real relationship as people, before they die. So I think that's something that I've noticed. It's not something I admittedly haven't given much thought about.
I think even from, I think we dabbed a little bit into this in one of the episodes. Like you said, on the table, we don't really talk about, the serious topics. It's just more of surface level stuff. I think it also boils down to, let's say when you get into a fight with your parents, or you speak out and then they say di boleso, or you're talking back, and they actually won't say. They won't apologize to you. They'll just, do something else that's in a form of acts of service or whatever. Like they'll get you food or whatever. So it's always like that. You always brush it, sweep it under the rug rather, and until it, becomes really big and then it just explodes.
Yeah, it's probably the generation gap. Trying to understand that. I think that's also why in the recent seasons we've done more to talk to guests who are not from our generation, just to understand them more. I think it's easier kasi if you talk to your own parents, minsan awkward din yung conversation. So, to talk to someone else who's not your parent pero medyo ka-edad nila, ka-generation nila, it kind of opens you up to a more nuanced conversation.
So, after the podcast, do you think more people are now willing to have harder conversations with their family members or so such? Because so I went through that. Like traditionally, I grew up with parents and grandparents, very tiger. They want to control your life and everything. But it took like 7 years or maybe even more to finally have like a very hard conversations about feelings, about a lot of this. Now to the point that my grandfather is just like telling me to squat at his graveyard now. Like, so we've talked about these deaths. So do you notice like more people are willing now to have these hard conversations?
Yeah, I think I can relate to what you just said there. You know, talking about feelings. No, we don't do that here. We don't do that at all. I think it for me, it started with the episode that I had with Valerie Tan. So it was an episode that my mom listened to twice, and I think after that, you know, it was more like she started to open up a bit more. Like she said, "Oh, I didn't know how you felt that way," when I actually said it in the podcast. And I guess it's a process. So it doesn't happen overnight. So it's more of like, I feel like, yeah, like what we've been saying from the start of this live stream is that, you know, once you start talking about it, it's gonna open up so many doors. So I totally understand where you're coming from, and hopefully there's gonna be more doors in the future.
And I feel like with the podcast and all that, it helps with like other listeners rather, to, I mean, it's a big help when they think that, oh, I'm not alone, and that there are other people who feel the same way, and that one can see and compare how other people have navigated through similar situations, right? And I think that alone takes a lot of burden off from the person who wants to try to build or reconcile a relationship with their elders.
It's also scary that if it's just you, sometimes you feel like, ako lang nakakaramdam nito. I feel like it's just a me thing, not everyone else. But apparently, it's an everyone kind of thing.
I wish though that we got more feedback. Kasi for the most part, we would get messages every now and then, sometimes from people we know, sometimes from people we don't know at all. So if you guys end up listening to the podcast and something resonates with you, or there's something you agree with, or better, something you disagree with, let us know. You know, let's open that line of communication, kasi we admittedly don't get a lot of feedback. And maybe it's because we're Chinese or we're Tsinoy. We don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah,
We just want to
paise.
let them do their thing. You know, they want to make noise on their podcast. Let's let them do their thing.
Yeah, I think it's also the culture of paise.
Yeah.
Yeah, or you know, I'm shy. I'm shy to ask this or that. I'm shy to give feedback, and I'll just stay here and not say anything.
Anyone else?
I'd like to say that I really appreciate the podcast that you're doing. I had no idea it existed. I knew about So Asian comics, but it really is very difficult not to talk about these things, not just with our kapwa Lannang, but also with other Filipinos. And I would like to go back to the Great Wall thing. And I realized this growing up, that a lot of non-Chinese Filipinos, what we call Juana, sometimes it's derogatory, sometimes it's not, but I will use it now, not in a derogatory sense, but just for differentiation.
I appreciate the disclaimer so much.
Yeah. Because, like, I noticed in Manila, they find the word inchik offensive, but in Cebuano-speaking areas, we're fine with it. So I think it's one of those. Anyway, I realized that a lot of them, they think that a lot of time they think it's a money thing. Like, botsi kami, so you don't want to marry us. And sometimes that hurts me, but then I realized that they think that way because I think that the education system has failed us here. And what I mean by that is, for many hundreds of years, diba, ang mga Sangley, ang mga Chinese, we were considered inferior sa mga Indio. When Jean Malat, a French guy, came here in the 1830s or 40s, he said that the Chinaman in the eyes of an Indio is a dog. They stab him and they rob him in broad daylight. That was in the 1840s. And then when the Dutch guy Jacob Wiselius came here in the 1870s, he said that when there is a court case between an Indio and a Chinese, the Indio will always win. And if a Chinese is killed by an Indio, the most likely penalty is destierro or banishment only for 3 years. And it's rarely applied because that's how the Spanish government and the natives used to treat the Chinese. And for me, but one of the things that made this Great Wall is the shared suffering of Chinese Filipinos over centuries. And then nakakasakit na they think it's just because ay kasi umangat na ang Chinese, umasenso na ayaw na namin sa inyo. I think they forget what we went through to get to where we are now. And siguro I think I appreciate yung mga podcasts like these kasi it helps to bridge itong gap of information, because I think hindi nila kasalanan that they don't know these things, no? And sometimes mahiya rin sila mag-talk, or baka wala silang kilalang lanlang. So where do they get information? They'll just get it from yung mga stereotypes na nakikita nila sa media. So yun lang, malaki ang pasasalamat ko na you guys are doing this. And gusto ko sabihin na every year may nagtatag sa akin nung So Asian Comics na tikoy, and it's the same one. It's yung may nakapula and then tinatapo niya ang tikoy. Multiple times, different people. They'll send that to me or they'll tag me every year. So yun lang. Thank you.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I think that there was a very important point there about context. Like, why does the Great Wall exist? And a lot of us might not be aware of that context. It gets lost in translation, lalo na as generations get older and sadly die out. Na may misinterpret din siya. And again, because we don't talk, it just gets left alone there. Nandyan lang siya, it becomes part of the fabric, and all of these assumptions come out. Right? So, yeah. Yes?
I see like two more.
Do you have episodes, or you're moving towards bringing like very older generations into the podcast
I think-
to story tell their experiences?
Yeah, I think the most we did was Atoy ko, right? And Auntie Rebecca.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so meron naman, it's also a matter of availability, finding guests who are game to tell their story, who, kasi yun nga, the elder generation is not as vocal, diba? Not as open. So it's also a matter of finding the guests who are really
We're open enough, yeah.
We actually had an episode where we invited Dr. Angela Yu.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
There.
She talked about mental health and the Tsinoy community. So we do have a few seniors, but would be nice to have more, right?
So I guess I should sort of introduce myself, if that's okay. I'm Darwin. I'm from the UP Chinese Student Association, CSA from UP Diliman. So I'm actually alumnus, and so is Stan. Yes, and actually, I was a faithful listener of the first edition, the original edition of your podcast.
Wow.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it during the lockdowns, right? And for unfortunately, yung bagong edition, I haven't gotten the time to listen yet, but I will get to that. And I was actually quite a fan, and so during my time in CSA, we had an event where we actually it's just an academic event, but we thought of like why not just bring like different people, the people we don't often hear from, to come talk to us, right? And so actually we were very fortunate enough to invite Ahia Cedric and Ahia Stan to our event, and it was quite nice. And one thing, okay, ito na yung question ko. So for me kasi, growing up, I never found like role models in the Lannang community. We're all busy about achieving. Our parents are so busy with providing for us. We don't really have that time to maybe sit down, talk about things, to really, wala yung role models, especially because we have so much taboos. We don't really talk about these things, right? And so, I mean, we're always pushed to be yun nga, yung model minority. But how about the different fields? How about our passions? We're always said na, oh, yung arts is for your hobbies lang, pastime lang yan, diba? Pero yun. So, for me, yun yung hinahanap ko is role models. And I think I found that in you guys from listening to your podcasts. And so my question would be, sino yung role models nyo in that maybe that inspired you to do what you do right now?
That's something I struggled with din kasi growing up. Like finding a Tsinoy role model, someone who looked like us, sounded like us. So Darwin, I'm sorry to say I didn't really have a Tsinoy role model. Kasi ang hirap eh. Like I talk for a living. I'm a broadcaster. And there weren't a lot of Tsinoy broadcasters growing up. And even if there were, they always hid their being Tsinoy. They always used a Filipino-sounding name. Whether it's yung biniling pangalan or a stage name. So, kung hindi sila mukhang Tsinoy, kasi, hindi na sila singkit or whatever, I wouldn't have known. So, I had to rely on yung mga role models ko from like the American media that I consume or the Filipino media that I consume. So, let me tell this quick story. When I got into radio in 2010, I noticed that one of the DJs who was there had a Chinese sounding last name. And then I asked him, "Oh, Chinese ka ba? Did you grow up Tsinoy? Did you go to a Chinese school?" Ano siya, amboy siya, laking America. And his answer was, "No man, I'm just human." Na-off ako dun. Sobrang na-off ako because it was like, so ba't di ka proud? Ba't mo ikinakahiya? And that's when it really reinforced sa akin na if there can be no role model or no voice for me to aspire to be, then I want to make sure that the next generation will have that voice. And if it has to be me, then sure. Andito na eh, you know?
I guess to add to what Stan said, it's the same. Like we're in the same field, so I also do like hosting and broadcasting. And every time they would ask you, what kind of persona do you want to bring to the table? It's usually like that. And then it has to be a little bit of your personality, what you grew up with, and kind of exaggerate it a bit. And for me, like what Stan said, I didn't have anyone to look up to. Like it's either it's too extreme, like how the media portrays us, it's too extreme, or it's totally different from what the Chinoys actually are. So I didn't really have anyone like that. And like what Stan said, we just had to, me and Sed had to create someone that we feel like we can put our personality to, which is actually Tauke. So we drew that, and then a lot of our personality, we put it in our comics. If the more serious side, we put it here in our podcast. So you know, to answer your question, it was mostly we had to create our own, because either you know people who are in the industry, you know, either they try to hide it, and like what I said before about me, like wea paise, like dekong Lannang we, parang nakakahiya siya. I didn't want to speak it in public. If somebody was speaking to me in like Hokkien, I didn't want to do it. But you know, after a while, I realized that you know I think we should embrace it. We should embrace like us being Lannang. It's not something to be embarrassed about. So I feel like you know if somebody speaks to you in Hokkien outside, I would speak to them in Hokkien. So I think it's just you know owning up to it. Just accepting it that you are Lannang, and I feel like that's something that a lot of people don't really come to terms with, yung accepting yung pagiging Lannang nila, kasi yung iba yun nga nahihiya, they don't want to say they're Lannang, but for me I love this. Like I was telling Will earlier, like I'm hearing like languages I grew up with, English, Lannang we, Tagalog, all in one room. So it's really nice to have this.
With Darwin's question, like for me, it was a lot of trial and error because I really did not have any role models. Like for me, even not just role models, but the concept of, let's say, being a fan of celebrities or having celebrity crushes, it was foreign to me even as a kid. So it was more of me just navigating through things that I like. So I like to draw comics, so I would just study like the other comic artists like Hergé for Tintin, and then Anthony Ong of Old Master Q. So I wouldn't have like role models, but just more of like I would take bits and pieces from people that I've read about, and then if it speaks to me, that was when I would see, oh, you know, maybe this is something that I could try to emulate. Because when it comes to comics, you have Hergé, Anthony Ong, but when it comes to, let's say, the way I present myself, I'm a huge fan of Charlie Watts, the drummer of the Rolling Stones. He was punk, but then he dressed in tailoring. So for me, I really like the energy that they bring into. So for me, I guess I don't have role models, but it's just an amalgamation of, I guess, different people who I've looked up to in different fields.
I think, sorry, just to add a little bit more to what I said earlier, my mom always said you should respect your roots, or yeah, you just have to accept your roots. And for a while, you know, like I was embarrassed about that, or you know, I didn't want to accept it. I feel like, you know, to create that personality, it's like what Stan and said, it's a mix of different Western media or maybe even Filipino media. You consume it, you take it in, but you still have to make it your own. So yes. I think accepting is the number one step to, you know, finding your identity.
Yeah, so if last call, anyone else? Oh, there's one more in the back.
Hello, my name is Renibon Galvez from UP Diliman, CSA as well. I hail from Zamboanga City, so I am also one of those Lannang from out of the Manila archetype. I'll be one of the Mong Paise Lannang to provide you a feedback this time. I've always wanted to share this, but as a Tsinoy, I kept it also in one of my journals and in my diaries to speak up. I have been listening for a year or so now with the Now Steaming podcast. And for disclaimer, you guys helped to save lives for Chinoys like me in the South who had no one, no Binondo, no Chinatown, no one, no neighbors to talk Hokkien with. I remember an episode where you guys talked about grief. Kadalasan tayong mga Chinoy, hindi natin pinag-uusapan ng kamatayan. When someone would pass away, you would just hush it off. But guess what? I showed this podcast, I let my mom listen to these podcasts, an episode on grief. And to my surprise, she had a different take on it. And actually, it made the family more expressive now. So to start off, I am a golden gay boy child, and my ahya is a typical machismo, like black sheep of the family. So when everything goes south with an elder kuya that's supposed to be a breadwinner, all of the burdens of the aya gets passed to the gay boy like me. So when pandemic struck, everybody was in chaos. Both of my parents also had a COVID, and I didn't know what to do, but I had to deal it the way Lannang people would deal it. Head it, face on, and straight. So I really want to share, for example, how my mother, despite her reluctance and not talking to me for 2 or 3 days after me letting her listen to this episode, opened up to me that, Nak, gracias, kaya dale tu kumigo uwi con este clase de audio podcast. Thank you for letting me listen to these types of talks that we never brought out. Apparently, my mom had 7 kabaongs ready now just to use, for anyone in the families to use. Kompleto siya ng package ng St. Peter, from program, from MC, hanggang sa paglibing, land titles we never knew we had. And nalaman ko lang na she's actually benefiting now from St. Peter kasi, ma'am, please gamitin nyo na po yung 7 na kabaong. Hindi, i-reimburse nyo sa akin yan kasi 10 taon ko nang hindi yan nagagamit. So we receive more money now because of not using this. And this is what I realized kasi kapag may namamatay sa aming Lannang family members, my mom would say, ako na to. Ako na ang tutulong, wag na kayong magbayad. Ako na to, alang-alang sa pamilya. Sabi ko, ang dami mo namang pera, ma. Pero yun pala, yung humility, yung patagong wealth, yung mga ganong stuff, is sometimes hindi ko malalaman unless nung hindi ko pinarinig sa kanya yung podcast na yan. And then, sinabi niya sa tatay niya yun. Sa tatay ko, which is sa asawa niya, sabi niya, okay, yung bading nating anak ay nag-unpack sa akin ng ganitong trauma kasi na-traumatize daw siya sa pandemic. Hindi niya alam kung anong gagawin. We took like 20 pills every day. Because everybody had COVID, pero hindi namin sinabi para hindi kami ma-quarantine. Sinabi lang namin, nag-Boracay kaming lahat for 2 months. So yun. So, pero our family doctor said na COVID yan, pero let's hush it down and just quarantine yourselves. So I took the family business for a short while. I took the fall while my ahya was in Davao, somewhere else. So I had to push it through. These stories like, after listening to podcasts like this, really personally resonate with me. I'm shaking right now kasi I don't know where else to talk, to connect these types of stories with. And my father we grew up in Zamboanga, a very conservative, religious, Spanish-speaking city, said na, anak, when I die, I don't want to get cremated. My mom said na, I also don't want to get cremated. I still want to get in touch despite being a Lannang. I still want to get in touch with the Juanate to the Lord gave us this body. I want to come back in this body as well. So I realized na Lannang Te and Juanate can actually intermesh with people like me after listening to a single episode from podcast like this. So at the end of the day, yung tatay ko naman, hindi lang, kung sa nanay ko, yung St. Peter na kabaong ang ni-reveal niya. Yung tatay ko naman, yung mga lupa. Nasabi ko, ganito pala tayo, may pera naman pala tayo. Bakit kailangan kong pumila kapag may nutrition man? So, ayun. So, right now, I'm also helping with the family business. And you guys, just a single episode, actually help me in the future with a lot of attorney fees. So, alam ko na ngayon yung manahan. And my parents says na, okay, this portion of land, for example, sa Zamboanga, we're a bit agriculture. Ngayon ko lang nalaman na we own at least 60 hectares, for example, of a land that's nakatenga lang. Kasi, ang sabi niya, lahat kasi ng mga anak ko, halos walang balak mag-business. Kung hindi yan na-bring up, wala sanang conversation like this. So again, your podcast actually saves lives na tulad na sa amin na galing pang Zamboanga that needs to ride a plane for 2 hours to get here. Mas malapit pa po ang Sabah, Malaysia sa amin kesa sa Maynila. So our culture, our Lannang Te, is very different down south. But with Now Steaming Podcast, I feel like we're all in one same culture. The shared experiences, the traumas we live, the stories and legacies we will continue to uphold because ika nga nila, ang wika tulad ng Lannang We ay buhay. Thank you.
It's incredibly tough to follow that ending, so I think we have to close it here. Wala na, it's gonna go downhill after that. Thank you so much. Please give it up for all of you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
wait.
you.
Sorry, I want to add something before we close. My mom always told me this. As at Tsinoy, as Lannang, Lanto Chapshu, Nansi Lannang, you have to accept that you're Lannang, you're a Tsinoy, and di mang paise, di si Lannang. Do not be ashamed. Because I don't wanna quote Tyrion Lannister here because I don't remember the exact quote, but you know, when you accept something about you, no one can use it to hurt you. So I feel like for everybody here, I want to leave you guys with that. Just accept who you are, be proud of it, and you know, don't be ashamed that you are Tsinoy and you're Lannang. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much. That's Now Steaming. We hope to hear from you, kahit DMs or whatever, and we hope to keep producing more episodes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Now Steaming. Now Steaming is hosted by Stan C, Kimberly Mas, and Cedric Cheng. Ronel Cheng is our writer and researcher. Our show is produced, mixed, edited, and mastered by the Pod Network.
The opinions of podcast creators, hosts, and guests are not necessarily reflective of the official stance of the Pod Network Entertainment, its hosts, or other network programs. The content created by the people behind the podcast is personal and not meant to harm any religion, ethnicity, group, organization, company, or individual.